Welcome to this session for MozFest 2021. Thank you to all of you that have taken the time today to join us. This session is 1 hour long. We're joined together by a team of colleagues of the project who have come together, some of whom we've worked with before, others of whom have come together, artists, academics, project managers, technologists, who've come together to create this project. This project could only have happened as a result of the pandemic. It was, we had planned to do the project from the summer of 2017. So projects of this nature that we, Nutcut is the company that I am a co-artistic director and founder of, and Nutcut in Hindi means mischievous or mischief. We imbue that kind of mischief and that childlike sense of fun and joy in all of our work, even in the dark work, even in the work that is difficult to swallow or comprehend for younger audiences. In this particular case, Nutcut is the third and final part of a trilogy of work called Defining Moments of the 20th Century. It started with a project called Dr. Blighty in 2016 that marked the centenary of the contribution made by soldiers from the empire who fought in the Great War. They were invisible. They didn't seem to have any narrative or any voice. And it was through the discovery of hundreds of letters at the British Library that we discovered that these soldiers had written and were being sent back to villages, that we discovered that this story needs to come alive. In 2018, we did a project called Never Set Eyes, which was about the greatest mass migration in history. Again, a story that is not often told, is not told in our history books or in our schools. And you have to dig quite hard to find it. That's the partition of India. India and Pakistan, the splitting of this great nation, 15 million people displaced or walked from one side of the border to another. Incredible, that hasn't been superseded as yet in history, despite all the changes that are going on this planet at this very moment. And this third and final part of the trilogy is Girmit. Girmit means, it comes from the word agreement, the English word agreement, and it particularly focuses on the hidden history, or the unknown history, I guess, of indentured labor in the 19th and 20th century. My connection is, I have a very personal connection with partition. My father was a young man in what was called the Quit India movement, or the Congress Party, that then became the Congress Party in the mid-1940s, and my family moved from Pakistan to India. So that was a very personal journey for me. Girmit is a deeply personal journey for me. My mother's family are from Fiji, Fiji Islands. My great-grandfather was an indentured laborer who grew up in a village in central India, and as a result of the development of the sugarcane industry, found his way to Fiji as an indentured labourer on a contract to cut sugarcane for 5 years. The rest is history, and the rest is sort of imbued in our project. Just before I introduce my colleagues, I just wanted to sort of say to you that this pandemic has affected all of us. Every single one of us that is staring at our screen at the moment, and everyone behind us, and everyone behind those people that we know, in some shape or form, whether directly or indirectly, through a friend, through a neighbor, through somebody personal. My mother was from Fiji, and just over a year ago, this month, she died as a result of COVID. She died in the first wave of the pandemic. I had no qualms about ensuring that this project will be a project that we make in her name, not just for my mum, but for my mother's mother, for my mother's mother's mother. And in this week of International Women's Week, it just gives me great pride to share that with you, and just to open the door and just ensure that the truth of who we are and what we represent is always told. We don't hold back on any aspect of our life, because when we grow our truth, we grow together, as difficult as it can be at times. So with that spirit, I'd like to introduce my team to you. First up is an amazing woman, incredibly resourceful, has a very busy home life and a very busy professional life, and manages to somehow, with a mischievous nut-cut smile, cut through the ice every single time. So Louise Green is our project manager. Welcome, Louise.
Hi everybody.
Next on my screen is Maria Galadin. Maria and I met at the Migration Museum, and we were introduced by Professor Dabydeen. Professor David Dabydeen is an expert on indenture and an all-round good person on so many levels. And I had a brief conversation with Professor Dabydeen, who is connected to the University of Warwick, at the launch of an exhibition and a book, which Maria was very, very deeply involved with and edited. And I was so fascinated by it. I said to David, where's the next generation of indenture academics? And David said, she's just there. And Maria was introduced, and that's it. You know, it was just perfect timing. So welcome, Maria. Next up is Lorna Inman. Lorna, we met probably this summer, I think. Last summer, 2020, just during that lockdown period. Our all-round creative, amazing, who I'll introduce separately, Jem, who's currently in a sugarcane field on your screens. He had this kind of fantastic approach to how to build collaborative teams, and Lorna came through Jem's interaction. Emma, the wonderful Emma Dias, is our general manager, an all-round fixer. She just makes things happen seamlessly in the background. Thank you, Emma. Jem, creative producer. I've got no words for Jem. He's just the most generous person that I've ever met. What we discovered was that we were a similar age. And when I was playing ZX Spectrum, for those of you who know what a ZX Spectrum is, when I was badly playing ZX Spectrum games in 1981, Jem was not only acing those games, but he was opening them up and rebuilding the technology that goes into it. So to meet a person like that, you know, is a great honor for me. Sarah Lowry, who we've worked with on a number of projects, has been the foundation of this project. Her experience and knowledge of oral history is incredible, and storytelling is what binds us together. And Sarah's gentle, calm, dignified and detailed approach is just so inspiring. So thank you and welcome, Sarah. And Shama Raman, who we've only just met. I think it's probably been a month, you know. But Shama's lent her beautiful voice and her ability to lift the words of this poem written by Professor Sathen Nandra, who just was able to, and you'll hear Shama's words in a moment. And I think just finally, welcome Jack. Jack is our sound artist. Thank you, Jack, for joining us. Jack provided the sound for our VR project. And Iqbal Singh, who is our Archivist Supremo. Iqbal works for the Outreach Department at the National Archives in Kew in London, and has given us access to documents that we would never, as artists, have had access to. I think that introduces the team for you. Louise, is there anything you'd like to add, or Jem, anything you'd like to add?
I think you've introduced everyone and the project perfectly, Ajay. And I think it would be a great moment to play the first sort of installment and the making of the first 3 minutes of our making of film, which will just give you a bit of a flavour of what we've been doing over the past. What are we doing? What are we saying now? Six months, I think, maybe longer, 8 months, 9 months. So when you're ready, Alex, go for it.
Bula Vinaka, 2020 marks the 50th anniversary of Fiji independence and the centenary of the abolition of indentured labour. Our story starts with sugarcane, here at the Royal Botanical Gardens in Kew in London. Seedlings were transported all around the world.
For most of the 19th century, Kew's principal purpose was economic botany, in other words, understanding plants that were of value, rubber, cinchona, sugar, and much of our work was around distributing these plants around the world for the British Empire. So Kew's had a long history in economic botany, and we continue to do that in the contemporary sense, but telling the full story of our history in the 19th and 20th centuries is a really important challenge for us now.
As the great-grandson of an indentured labourer who travelled from a small village in central India to the island of Fiji in the South Pacific over a century ago, I brought together a collective of artists, academics, educators and technologists to create a multi-dimensional arts project that retells the human story of indentured labour by bringing together the past into the present in order to reshape the future. From pen to paper, we start with one dimension, a graphic novel, a story through the eyes of a 10-year-old of our indentured superheroes. By recording the sound of plants, we listen to and feel the sonics of the sugarcane plant by connecting back to the source of indentured labour, the sugarcane plant itself. Through virtual reality, we immerse ourselves into the 360-degree world of the Girmitia. What underpins our project is the oral histories. We hear first-hand accounts from men, women and children, the ancestors of our indentured labourers.
So these are the stories of men, women and children. They are individual stories of people who travelled from India across continents, and we need to see them as people, as individuals, not as nameless groups of labourers.
Girmit, through the lens of art and heritage, tells the story of change, of connectivity and the complexity of the human spirit.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that's the first 2 minutes of a film that we describe as the making of film. It's 11 and a half or so minutes long, and it's a collection of voices. On screen, you just saw Maria. On some of the other films, we have Lorna, Sarah, and Jem. And also, it was really important for us to connect directly with the leaders of those institutions, the National Archives and Kew. There's a thirst for change. It's happening, and it's happening slowly. And that change is that one word of truth. And this isn't about changing history. This is just about shining a torch on areas that may have been not spoken about in the past for all sorts of reasons, you know. And I think our duty, as a collective, was to really, really dig deep. And on that note, I just want to introduce Maria. And Maria, perhaps you could just give us a sense of what has Girmit, the approach that we've taken, how has it been different for you, and what aspects have been missing from the sort of Girmit story in the past, and how are we planning to change that, I guess?
You know what I think? I think that for a very long time there has been a divide between people who work in academic institutions, working as researchers, as historians, as sociologists on the history of indentured labour, and people who are the descendants of indentured labourers, and that's something very much
I am against as an academic. I think that the history belongs to the community descended from indentured labourers. And I think that something that is very beautiful about this project is that it is interested in what we refer to in the academy, but should just be a matter of practice for everyone, is public and community engagement. This project is driven by everybody's desire to take this history outside and to show it's not just a history, Ajay, of people like you and I who are descendants of indentured labour. This is a history of the British Empire. It is British history, and it needs to be seen as such. Our ancestors were transported as labourers under the British Empire, and the places that our great-grandparents came from were British colonies. And in kind of, you mentioned in the introduction that this was a hidden history, and it absolutely is a hidden history. Historians have tended to focus on the abolition of slavery as the history of the British in 19th century plantation, in the representation of 19th century plantation history. And what they have neglected traditionally is the system that came after it of indenture. And we know, you and I know, that within our communities there are very precious, very personal stories. And I think that the drive behind this project is to take those stories through the work we've done on oral histories and put them on a wider stage and make them accessible to, so they're not just sitting in an archive, they're not sitting on a shelf that holds theses in a library. They are actually out there in the world for people to access.
Oops, sorry. Thank you, Maria. Unmuted myself. We need to be reminded, we as the people who are involved in that project. And I think it just, I find that knowing more about our history, knowing more about our neighbours, knowing more about our nations, and knowing a little about nation building, it makes us, it gives us that broader, more detailed perspective. Jem, I just wanted to come to you, just pulling on Maria's perspective on that kind of academic, broader field. Just, I said this earlier in your introduction, you have been a breath of fresh air for me. I will confess that there are many things that Jem, the jargon that Jem uses, he knows what he's talking about. It just takes me a lot longer. I kind of get there in the end. But Jem, just give us a little bit about how you've seen the project or the journey that you've been on.
Yeah, I think touching on what you Maria said, the sensitivity from that first Zoom meeting, and now we're doing a Zoom world premiere at Mozilla Fest. It was like understanding, the sensitivities to this subject. And somebody could come in and I could come in and say, yeah, let's do this wowie whizzy thing. And the thing was to actually do something like Maria touched on, something that was accessible, but something that used technologies that I started experimenting with about 5 years ago, that now have become more accessible because of smartphones being smarter and YouTube having a reach of 2 billion people. So the whole idea was to kind of tinker with this multi-dimensional elements, and also go finding Tui in Fiji, who is an amazing graphic artist, and looking at different angles, and then Lorna, who is an amazing environment kaleidoscopic tilt brush artist, which you could use to make heirlooms. And this is what I mean now. I'm in Lorna's artwork multi-dimensionally. I'm actually 4D, transcending space and time within the artwork that we've created. And so there's a lot of elements that you're only going to explore when you go to the Girmit World portal. And also this thing, Mozilla, you're going to search and you're going to find the truth that has been hidden for such a long time. So yeah, I mean, it's been, as we know, an emotional project. It's been a personal project, for you, AJ. And so yeah, I think a lot of above and beyond DIY ethos, as you picked up on as well, has gone into this. And I think, yeah, I think it's a project for the now, and hopefully a piece of art that will kind of stand the test of time.
Thank you, Jem. That's fantastic. Look, I'm conscious of, an hour goes like that. We've just finished 20 minutes, and we're only just kicking off. But it's really important to hear those of you that have taken time out. Does anybody have any questions on what they've heard so far, or anything that's puzzling them, or any contributions that anybody on this call would like to make? We'll also allow time towards the end of the session, so if there is anything that you feel you'd wish to ask, and also beyond this session, to keep in touch with us through our portal, Girmit.world, GIRMIT.world, which we're slowly beginning to inhabit. And as Jem just reflected on, the idea of this project building, really, traditionally when we make artwork, this would be the kind of show night, the opening night, and then the project would slowly kind of disappear. But I think with the approach that we've taken, this is only the beginning. In the 10 months that it's taken to make this project and make it visible and bring this talented group of artists together, it just feels like we're scratching the surface of this world. Sarah, I just wanted to bring you into this. Sarah Lowry, our amazing oral historian, amongst other things, of course. We've talked about this before on many occasions, Sarah, that this is, we're losing, a generation, before us, and this project was always about capturing the stories and the narratives of that generation. So I just wanted to ask you just a little about your input in ensuring that oral histories were the foundation of Girmit.
Yes, of course. And just to say, very thrilled to be part of the extended family and the sort of warmth of the organisation, which is very real in my experience. I think it's very kind of you to call me an oral historian for this project, because really the thing I did was provide the training for the people that did the interviewing, who were wonderful and gave up a lot of their time to come along and learn about how to do oral history as best as we possibly could do it, to do justice to the story that what we wanted to tell through the project and the people that came forward to give their interviews. So that was my major input, I think, and it was a real pleasure to meet all the volunteers and the wider members of the Girmit team as part of that.
Thanks ever so much, Sarah. Pam Jarvis, welcome from Brighton. Pam Jarvis has been somebody that has been a member of the Nutcut family and a friend for many years, and her experience is really heartwarming, I have to say. The Pam's approach and her input on many of the projects that we've done in the recent past has been so helpful. So Pam, thank you and welcome. Pam, can you
for such kind words. Much appreciated. Lovely. I'm really pleased to be on this project. It so excites me because what is so interesting about these untold stories, these lost histories, and it brings it to light in such an interesting way, such a communicable way.
Thank you, Pam. And Pam's role in Girmit currently is to evaluate the project, to reflect on the journey that this project is going on and how it fits in the kind of wider heritage world. And I think what the conversations that we've been having with Pam is how brilliant the opportunity to use the digital space has been, and to exploit that digital space. So thank you. I just wanted to reflect back on the starting point of the story, Kew Gardens. You know, in the 19th century, you know, botanists were recruited in Victorian London, in Victorian England, and Kew was a place of propagating those plants to see if they could grow under different climates. And when those botanists in Kew realized that this could be an opportunity to take some of those saplings onto a ship at the docks in East London, off they went. They went to the Indian Ocean, the Caribbean, the South Pacific, and experimented with these seeds and saplings. And as Richard Deverill, the director of Kew, talks about, this wasn't just a pretty garden. This wasn't just somewhere to visit on a Sunday afternoon to see the wonderful crocuses as they are at this very moment in time. This was a place where it was about nation building. You know, it's about looking at how the spread of the nation, British Empire at the time, could grow. So I think it's important to reflect on that. And we were very fortunate to connect with Richard, who connected us to his colleagues. And in the Palm House, there are sugarcane plants, which we had the fortune, with Jem's facilitation and determination, to work with another collaborator called Snooks, who has created something called Subpack, to really listen to the sonics of that plant. And we're beginning to think about extending that. And what is the sound of plant? I mean, once upon a time, if I'd said that, you know, in public, you know, you would get laughed at, right? And we all must have recognized experiences of that. But now there is a serious interest and a necessary need. And I think for us, our next thing, really, what we're keen to look at is turmeric. We're going to take turmeric, which is, in Hindi, it's called haldi, and it has all sorts of medicinal properties. It has all sorts of, you know, properties in food and all of that. So that's something else that we're going to start to unpick the story of. I don't know if there's anybody else that wants to come in from our team who wishes to sort of contribute to that first half of this session. I'm doing my best to keep an eye on time. We sort of said the first half an hour would be about the sort of overview with a bit of the film and some of us sharing our thoughts and wisdom. But if there isn't any more on that, I think it might be useful to move towards the second part of the session, that is how we've used technology to tell this story of a community. This story, as Maria says, of individuals, you know, who have largely for a century or more are nameless, you know, are invisible. And what is it that this pandemic has done? You know, for many artists and arts organizations, it's been an opportunity to step back and reflect and self-reflect. I think that wasn't an option for us for all of those reasons I described at the beginning. I think the opportunity for us was when you come out of that first phase of mourning, you start to think, what is our purpose? How do we now tell this story to a wider world? And how do we build a community in sharing that story? So I think technology has you know, propelled us to this point. Girmit would not have looked like this were it not for the pandemic. Girmit would have been a live installation in a festival. So could we, Louise, show the VR film? So this is the VR film created by Lorna Inman. And we'll show you the first couple of minutes.
The gifts of the Girmityas. He gave us the gift of a journey and made us friends we knew not. Shared, sacrificed, blessed and died. In blood bondage, your fate was tied. In a single step, a silent knot. You bound our lives to so many.
Thank you, Louise. Thank you. We've obviously just cut that short, but I'm going to now introduce you to the wonderful Lorna Inman. Welcome, Lorna.
Hello, hi.
What you were just viewing there was a journey between when an idea comes in one's head and there is some factual information, and then we as artists have to fill in the gaps. Lorna, it's been a pretty interesting journey, right?
Yeah, what a journey it's been. The project has just evolved and evolved, and when we didn't think it was going to evolve anymore, we were all surprised as it did, and it just kept on growing, and I'm pretty proud of what we've accomplished now.
Lorna, then tell us when if you could just reflect back on those really early conversations that we were having, and then if you could just reflect on where we're at now. Just, you know, has that changed? Did that change much, or has it remained the same? I mean, I think I know some of the answer to that.
Yeah, so I guess to begin with, I actually recently found an image of my first draft of the project, and I create everything you can see in a program called Tilt Brush, which allows me to literally paint around myself in 3D virtual space inside a VR headset. And from within there, I can take images of what I've created. And the very first thing that we created was 3 separate scenes, but all together in one Tilt Brush file. And just for comparison to now, it's now 5 separate world-size sketches. And then on top of that, we had between 20 and 30 separate smaller sketches with assets that were inserted into the huge scenes because the scenes nearly broke the limits of the file limits. So we had to kind of cleverly find ways to insert more into it. So just as a kind of just to say how much it's grown, I think that's probably the best example I could give.
I mean, I was just saying this in the introduction. It just, I'm sure for all of you on this Zoom call, many of you, just we've all accelerated our ability to understand technology in a way, in a year in which we would never have done before. Perhaps this year in our understanding of technology, connecting with our family and friends in different parts of our city or our country or the world has accelerated. What we've learned in 10 months or 11 months is probably what might take some people or some communities a decade to learn, and sometimes that forced nature of change is really important. So I say all of that because Lorna's, sort of approach, I think the approach is really important, kind of, it's a lonely job, I guess, being an artist, with your headset on. What does that feel like? Because I mean, you're, in a way, that responsibility is quite great, isn't it? There's a great responsibility for the first time in human history with this technology to take this story and put it into a different space for a new generation and a younger audience or a family audience. How does that feel? I mean, that sense of responsibility.
So I guess to begin with, I creating in VR and in this setting and the process has been really great because it's given me kind of somewhere to go every day, somewhere different. And in terms of having the responsibility of doing it, of drawing it, as you know, Ajay, but others won't, I've just always wanted to make sure that we're telling the story in the right way. And with any kind of art, I feel like with VR in particular, it kind of brings you a little bit closer to the messages of the art that the art is trying to tell. So we were always thinking of ways that we could do that, and immersing someone into these environments gives them an opportunity to kind of feel something different in a different way to reading about the information online, or even just watching a video or watching someone talk about it. Putting them into an environment, and especially with children as well, as we'll be sharing this with schools, gives the opportunity to learn about it or want to delve into it deeper, to learn about it more. And I guess we hope that the environments, kind of with the atmosphere that they have, just encourages people to do that, and to take the initiative to learn more about it.
Thank you, Lorna. I'm conscious, is there anybody, I don't want to force anyone to unmute, but if there's any, please feel free at any time, use the chat, wave at us, just to kind of, if there's anyone who wants to pick up on anything that I've been talking about, or Lorna, or Louise, or Jen, or any of us for that matter, up till now. Shama, welcome. Shama's one of the newest members of the extended family.
Hello.
Hello. Tell us a little bit about, this brief experience that you've touched upon, I think, Shama, and not only that, just perhaps that you could also tie that in a little with your professional practice, both you as an artist and as a scientist, academic, etc. Just something with, we've only just met, Shama, and things are supposed to happen for good reasons, and lending your voice to the project to bring those words alive has been really important for us. So please.
Yeah, I'm absolutely delighted to have been put in touch with all of you and invited by Jem, actually. So this whole story starts with Jem again. And I was fortunate enough to meet him during the release of my second album, Truth Be Told, in which he brought in some 360 magic. And it was an album that also included spoken word and storytelling and music, obviously. And we were trying to bring it all together with technology as well, specifically wearable tech, which allowed me to also influence the sound and the visuals at the same time as interacting with choreographers and dancers. So the idea of multi-dimensional storytelling totally appealed to me, and I've often used it in my own sort of science art crossovers. So currently I am the CEO of NeuroCreate, where I'm productizing some of my PhD findings. We're building AI-powered creative collaborators. So really cool to be here at MozFest on that part. So it's very ethical. And the idea is for us to get people into the flow state using sensors, including visualizations of their flow state as well, and sonifications. So one of the cool things that I was really attracted to was the whole, the sonification of the bamboo here, which is really interesting as well, and obviously being able to lend my voice to the wonderful Lorna's 360 video, and of course working with Jack and how beautifully you've integrated it all. So it was just really, really interesting for me. I'm particularly interested in nature sounds as well, and my next thing hopefully will be to incorporate some of the sort of sensory-based sound sonification angles from a trip to Antarctica, also bringing to light this idea of I suppose empathy, through everything, through music, and through different bodily sensations, such as you guys mentioned the subpack and everything like that. So very much about embodied, multi-dimensional ways of experiencing things. Very much, attracted me to the whole thing. Obviously, as well, I'm from Asian descent, as you can probably see, and there's migration has been a big part of my family. I'm from Bangladesh originally. And I was born in UAE. My parents were also, had lived through, I think, 3 of these wars as well. And so I think there is a certain, I know when we talked about it at Jay's, like how to actually maybe bring in, I don't know, this internationality or this migration sort of tone of voice to the reading, I guess. It's just something that I've lived and experienced. So I think there was definitely a more emotional connection from that perspective as well. So
great, Shama. Yeah, and I think this idea of this international perspective is really important. I mean, I guess for us, in a way, when I say I'm talking about collective us, it's a kind of normal. It's not. My mother's from Fiji, my dad's from India, and my parents made London home. British through the core. And every one of those distinct interventions, there's a great pride. Whether it's through cuisine or language or culture or politic or history, whatever. They can all exist symbiotically. And coexist with each other. And I think that then you're drawn and attracted to artists and collaborators who also one doesn't have to have all of those layers. I think one has to have that empathetic openness to be able to kind of go, I get this. Oh, my mother's not from Fiji, my dad's not from India, I wasn't born in London, but I get this. That's absolutely acceptable. It's just the understanding, the collective understanding. So I think part of the project, it was important for us all to share the same values, have the same, invest in the same mission, and just check in with each other. I think the other thing to share with you all is that we made it our commitment when we pressed the start button on this project in the first lockdown in the UK. And those of you who are not in the UK may be slightly unfamiliar with, we've had 3 lockdowns, I believe. And that first one was like an extended summer holiday for many of us. The birds came back to the gardens, the streets were empty, it was hot. There were a number of, people were using outdoor spaces more. There was a kind of a zest for life, in that first lockdown. So when we pressed the button to start this project, we committed ourselves to meeting every week on a Thursday for 1 hour. We did our best. I think we did quite well, not for it to go over 10 a.m. So we started at 9 and then we finished at 10 a.m. And so it was almost like, for many of us, it was a kind of a start to the week. You know, it gave us that structure. And then we extended it, at 6 months down the line, we extended it to each fortnight. So I think there's something important to share with you, all of you who've taken, you know, your time to give us an hour of your precious time to share with you the structure that we created for ourselves as individuals. Because we've all, in many, you know, I was saying this at the beginning, been affected, had change in our lives in some ways. I just want to briefly just introduce Jack. Jack, if you can hear me, Jack has created a really what I would describe as a filmscape, you know, and some of you may have heard that in the music. So Jack, again, you know, you're not as new into the project as Shama, but nevertheless, you were not far. You know, Shama's not far behind you. So thank you for coming on board and being patient with us. You know.
No, it's been a pleasure. Yeah, I think, you know, it was like you say, it's a question of, similar to Lorna, of like trying to tell the story as well as possible with, you know, in my case with the medium of sound. So, and just really complementing the visuals as much as possible. And yeah, filling out the space was really important, and kind of, yeah, it became like a film, you know, you're right, yeah, like a filmscape kind of. That's definitely how I approached it. And I spent quite a long time like gathering materials sort of that I thought were, you know, would achieve that. So obviously we had the like raw recordings from Kew Gardens, which are in the sugarcane scene. And then, yeah, it was just a case of sort of, I mean, it's difficult as well because, you know, obviously it's like 19th, 20th century. So sound-wise, you know, you want it to kind of sound up like from that time, but, you know, it's very difficult to do that.
I think
without...
you know, one of the things that we've realized is when you set on this journey, you throw yourself in at the deep end. You know, we're dealing with subject matter and material that may not be familiar. There may not be an archive for it. There may not be the voices of that generation who can speak about that period. That is clearly the case. But I think you know, the truth is in making the work, doing something, you know. So at the moment, this project has a 360 film, which I hope you'll all view, and please do share your feedback with us. We then have an oral history book, which Maria is leading on, and of oral histories of the voices of that period. We have a graphic novel, a comic book that we've created by our Fijian artist. And then we have an education pack by Ellie, who's our education specialist. So there are just different, so rather, you know, we could have just had this as an installation in a festival that would have toured. It would have been ephemeral, it would have rocked up, it would have been a temporary exhibition. You know, people ourselves would have visited that exhibition, taken a few selfies, put it on Instagram, walked away with a memory. This actually has been, I think, it's been a departure from how we normally work, but it's been absolutely unique on so many levels, because now in a normal period, whatever that means, we would make a show and then we would move on to the next. And the memory of that show, you as the audience would come and see, and you would leave with that memory. This is completely different. We've created this portal, girmit.world, where all of the assets of the project will exist free to public. That's why it was important for us to connect with Mozilla. It was really important that we were looking for a partner where we wanted to launch this piece of work. So it was finding those ethical, open, you know, partners. So I'd like to think at some point Mozilla and the team that surround it, become an even greater part of the extended family. I'm just conscious of time. We've got 10 minutes left, and there's so much to talk about and so little time. And I'm really grateful, to each of you, each and every one of you that has just taken time to, have virtual fire blowing things blowing in your background. For you as a couple, for you as individuals, for those of you that have just taken time, to come to this space. You could be doing something else. Is there anything? I mean, this is really an open call now, to share with us anything that you feel has been perhaps missing, perhaps you're not sure about, you're slightly confused about, or you want more clarity on. Is there anyone?
I have an inquiry to just put out to the collective here. I've been exploring metaverse media and the media created from these virtual experiences, and I've produced about 500 hours of virtual events in the last year. I've been doing this for about 15 years, but what I've seen is this sort of cumulative effect of network building, and yet no public commons for the media to thrive in. And that's the events, and that's also the experiences, like all the things you've seen in my backgrounds from different events that I've produced. And so I'm beginning to think about the structure of platform cooperatives and the public commons and metaverse media, and how we align. How does that work effectively? So I guess the question is, how do we continue to weave our efforts together and build something that helps all of these ships rise and reach new people, so that they don't just sort of die in little open web corners of the place and never find their true audience. So platform cooperatives, and where do we come together around the future of this?
Eva, I think that's a brilliant question, and you have entertained us with your background. So thank you for that. It hasn't distracted me at all, but it's always nice to have somebody playing with their keyboard. Eva, I think that's an excellent question. I think what we would be really happy to do is perhaps pick this conversation up with you offline, and I think that's a question that we have normally in our previous lives been able to answer, because our thing is to present, our sort of raison d'etre is to tell stories free to public in any way we can, whether it's on film, whether it's on a podcast, whether it's in a festival, whether it's in a shopping center or a town square. That's always been our mission and our desire and our need. And what we get from that is immediate feedback, because you're there in the town square. If somebody doesn't like your work, they walk away. If somebody is busy shopping, and they stumble upon you, the connection is really, really powerful and strong. And I totally agree with you, that's currently missing in the virtual space, but I don't think it's missing for long, because I've heard this question come up a number of times, even within our group. We're invested in thinking, how do we get feedback, from what we've done? Is our work good, bad, or indifferent? Tell us. We want to know. If it isn't working for you, then say it isn't working. If it isn't working and you know why, then say that too. So there is definitely, I think, a virtual openness about and responsibility. I'm gonna ask on that note, because there's an opportunity here of feedback with talking about hubs and Mozilla hubs. Can I bring you into that conversation, Jem?
Yeah, I think I think I'm connected to Evo and LinkedIn, and it's one of the things over the last 5 years with Play Labs that we've noticed this kind of change and convergence between people that would traditionally make films and games, and that's kind of how we approached this experience, that it was going to be an experience, and that we're using software like Unity and Tiltbrush. And the reason to go to Mozilla was because there are a lot of walled gardens in technology when it comes to platforms, and Mozilla has always been about an open and fair web. I've collaborated over the last 5 years with them, and that's why we wanted to tinker a little bit within the portal of setting up a Mozilla hub. And so that's going to be a space where, with Lorna's artwork, 360 video, the heirlooms. So originally when AJ first approached me, this was going to be for the Fiji 50th anniversary, and there was a family heirloom that's in the museum in Fiji of a kind of corn grinder. And one of the things was to kind of get Lorna to develop that, and this object kind of transcends from the comic book story, which has even more detail into the story of indenture and the personal story of AJ's family, which then transcends from this object that can come into the 360 and virtual world, which one day it could also be a projection mapped installation. We could 3D print the heirlooms that Lorna's hand drawn. And another thing as well, there's a lot of people that are not here as well that have gone into the behind the scenes of this. So the people that I'm sure you're working with as well that craft the technology side in Unity, and also what the thing I'm in now, Genimo, which is an open platform where you can spatial cast into any 3D environment within Unity. So a lot of the stuff we're doing you couldn't do 5 years ago. It would cost, like this would cost maybe £15,000 if you used a Unity Microsoft Studio to do this kind of work. So a lot of this is experimental. Some of it has been around for a while, and some of it is blending of the art form. So definitely it'd be a conversation we'd love to continue on how do we have the metaverse that's open and free and fair, I think.
Thank you, Jem. That's great, and Ivo, thank you for bringing that subject matter up. That's really important to us, and I'd like to make that offer to you. Please remain connected, and let's not drop that conversation. I just wanted to reflect on Mark's comment in the session. Yes, Mark, spot on. A session on Mozharb's Hop-In, which I don't know, VR, Zoom, etc. I think, yes, we're with you on that. If we can be a voice and we can be of any use, then feel free to use us. We've just got a couple of minutes left, folks. Did I hear collective, virtual, international? I think I did. That's fine. Sometimes they're silent, those R's. It's been an absolute pleasure to be able to speak to you, and feel that you've still got a couple of minutes. If anybody has any last final words, there is still time. But it's been an absolute pleasure for us to be able to do this. Oh, thank you, Mark. Yes, it was amazing. I'd like to thank you. For those of you who are watching this after this, as a recording, thank you for coming on. Thank you for watching. You're not party to the chats, but I hope we've done justice to the chat. There is so much to share with you, but I think we all have inside of us a personal story, and we all have the responsibility at some point in our lives to share that personal story, either with a partner or a neighbor or a family member, or in this case, to take that giant leap and share it with the world. And it's so liberating on many ways, and it's so exciting on many other ways. And I just want to thank my friends, the team. We're not just collaborators or partners now, we're friends, and we're family, I think. You're special people. You're talented, you're incredibly patient, and we look forward to just growing this project. And out of the growth of this project, I think there is opportunities to grow other pieces of work. and only time will allow us that luxury. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you everyone for joining us. Go to Girmit World to find out more. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you, yeah.
Thank you.